Ford's Theater. It's April 14th, 1865. Imagine you are sitting inside Ford's Theater, watching a play, a comedy. The actors are on stage, and the lights are low. It's a full house tonight. Some 1,700 people in attendance. You glance up toward the presidential box above the stage and see President Abraham Lincoln enjoying the play. You feel relaxed. Washington, D.C. is a happy place in April 1865 because the American Civil War, which has lasted 4 long years, has drawn to a close. D.C. is a madhouse of excitement, an ongoing party of jovial and drunken glee. But be aware, because the actor John Wilkes Booth is also in the theater tonight. You will recognize him. He is dressed in all black from his head to his feet. His dark blue shirt, the only spot of color on him, and tall black boots about 23 inches high. But the most important accessory Booth carries with him is the one he carries inside of him, a monstrous grudge. Now, you notice the time is about 10:15 p.m. Suddenly, a man leaps from the presidential box onto the stage. Must be part of the play. Or is it? You realize the president has just been shot. Stop that man! In a little over 9 hours, Abraham Lincoln will die. It will take his killer 12 more days to die. Would it interest you to know Lincoln's life could have been spared? Let's take a closer look. In 1865, Lincoln opens a drawer in his desk at the White House and looks at an envelope marked assassination, filled with exactly 80 written threats against his life. Although thousands were written, Lincoln's secretaries disposed of most of them, saying they were, quote, brutal and vulgar. I cannot bring myself to believe that any human being lives who would do me any harm, Lincoln says. Many expected Lincoln would be killed during his first inaugural address. One man said he was expecting to hear the crack of a rifle aimed at Lincoln's heart. Lincoln, an avid theatergoer, often attended the theater as much as 3 times a week. In November 1863, Lincoln watched his would-be assassin, John Wilkes Booth, perform. Hauntingly, Lincoln sat in the same box he would be assassinated in 17 months later. Booth looked up at the president several times during the play in a threatening manner. So much so that one of Lincoln's guests said, "He looks as if he meant that for you." Lincoln replied, "Well, he does look pretty sharp at me, doesn't he?" Lincoln requested to meet the actor after the play. Booth refused. He detested Lincoln and often used a picture of the president as a target while practicing with his pistols. It was at the home of Mary Surratt where Booth did much of his planning to murder Lincoln. Mary was a Southern sympathizer whose son, John, was Booth's right-hand man. Mary's D.C. boarding house became known as the nest in which the egg was hatched. Living at Mary's boarding house was Louis Weichmann, a young man with brown hair, dimples, a wisp of a mustache, and a waddle when he walked. He was close to Mary and good friends with her son, John. He was a nebby man who eavesdropped on Booth's meetings with Surratt. But he was also an intelligent man who worked for the War Department, which would have made him a great asset to Booth. He probably knew a great deal about Booth's conspiracy, but played dumb when he decided to tell a friend at the War Department. He thought something might be going on. He did this just so he could say he told someone and made it appear as though he were innocent and ignorant of Booth's plans. Here's what's certain. Louis Weichmann knew enough to prevent Lincoln's death. On the afternoon of April 14th, Booth prepared Ford's Theater for the assassination. He drilled a hole in the door leading to the presidential box so he could see Lincoln's position before shooting him, and collected the wood shavings in his handkerchief. These shavings were later found in Booth's coat pocket when he died. Why didn't anyone question Booth's actions? He was the last person anyone would suspect. An enviable man, a successful actor earning $20,000 a year, sometimes $1,000 a night, a great deal of money at the time. Booth had every reason to be happy, but things are not as they seem. He is a Southern sympathizer determined to murder Lincoln. No one realized it. Aiding Booth was George Atzerod, a Prussia-born immigrant who believed helping Booth would allow him to get rich and quickly. He was often seen selling horses for Booth. George's assignment was to murder the vice president, and it was remembered by witnesses that George was inquiring as to the whereabouts of the vice president. Michael O'Loughlin, another of Booth's men, changed his mind and claimed he wanted nothing more to do with the plot. He went to the home of the Secretary of War the night before the murder to possibly tell all about Booth's plans, but was sent away. Lewis Powell was assigned by Booth to kill the Secretary of State. Powell was seen at the Secretary of State's home on April 13th and 14th, examining the best way to enter the home. Powell was remembered as the man who came to the window and inquired about the health and condition of the Secretary of State. But it was Edwin Stanton, Secretary of War, who claimed concern for Lincoln's safety. Yet, when Lincoln requested a specific bodyguard, Stanton refused. Intentionally? Instead, Lincoln's bodyguard for the evening was John Parker, a heavy drinker who was not at Ford's protecting the president. He was next door, here, drinking at the Star Saloon. William Crook was Lincoln's most reliable bodyguard. Crook advised Lincoln not to go to the theater tonight, but Lincoln insisted his wife was looking forward to it. So, "Good night," Crook said to Lincoln. "Goodbye," Lincoln replied. Crook is troubled. Lincoln always said good night, never goodbye. Crook takes no further actions to stop the president and will be troubled by Lincoln's words for the remainder of his life. At 8:25 p.m., the Lincolns arrive at Ford's Theater and take their seats in the box. 2 hours later, a determined Booth climbs the winding staircase to the tiny vestibule leading to the presidential box. Sitting outside the vestibule is White House messenger Charles Forbes. Booth presents Forbes with his calling card, and Forbes allows Booth to pass. Booth enters the presidential box and pulls the trigger on his .44 caliber Philadelphia Derringer, which is loaded with just one bullet. Lincoln is peering over the edge of the box, and Booth's bullet enters Lincoln's head just behind his left ear and travels diagonally 7.5 inches before lodging near his right temple. As Booth leaped across the box, his spur caught the flag that was decorating the presidential box. 8 seconds later, Booth makes his escape. These people who touched Lincoln's life would have, should have, could have, but did not. Lincoln himself chose to ignore the threats, which cost him his life. But, as Lincoln said, if I am killed, I can die but once. But to live in constant dread of it is to die over and over again. Thank you all very much.